Welcome to worship this morning. I can't welcome anyone on Zoom today because those who often join us on Zoom are not able to be with us, but we will welcome those who will watch the recording and those who will listen to the recording, because we join together across time and space and we're united within the loving light of God. So we light our candle of meeting as a symbol of the light of God that comes into the world and cannot be put out, and within which we live. Then we will hear our first reading, which Chris is going to read for us.
This reading is from the Acts of the Apostles, chapter 3, verses 1 to 10. One day, Peter and John were going up to the temple at the hour of prayer at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and a man lame from birth was being carried in. People would lay him daily at the gate of the temple, called the Beautiful Gate, so that he could ask for alms from those entering the temple. When he saw Peter and John about to go into the temple, he asked them for alms. Peter looked intently at him, as did John, and said, "Look at us." And he fixed his attention on them, expecting to receive something from them. But Peter said, "I have no silver or gold, but what I have I give you. In the name of Jesus Christ of Nazareth, stand up and walk." And he took him by the right hand and raised him up. And immediately his feet and ankles were made strong. Jumping up, he stood and began to walk. And he entered the temple with them, walking and leaping and praising God. All the people saw him walking and praising God, and they recognized him as the one who used to sit and ask for alms at the Beautiful Gate of the temple, and they were filled with wonder and amazement at what had happened to him.
And we hear our next reading, and Lillian is going to read for us.
Matthew 7, verses 15 to 23, true and false prophets. Watch out for false prophets. They come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ferocious wolves. By their fruit you will recognize them. Do people pick grapes from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? Likewise, every good tree bears good fruit, but a bad tree bears bad fruit. A good tree cannot bear bad fruit, and a bad tree cannot bear good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. Thus, by their fruit, you will recognize them. Not everyone who says to me, "Lord, Lord," will enter the kingdom of heaven, but only the ones who does the will of my Father who is in heaven. Many will say to me on that day, "Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name, and in your name drive out demons, and in your name perform many miracles?" Then I will tell them plainly, "I never knew you. Away with you, you evildoers."
Thank you. Today I want to continue with some of the ideas that we were dealing with last week. Last week we were thinking about how the disciples set to work to try and work out how to live in the light of what had happened at Pentecost. And we linked that with Jesus' teaching towards the end of that collection of teachings and instructions we call the Sermon on the Mount, about doing for others what they need and choosing the narrow way of loving others rather than the broad way of self-interest. And today we've heard just the next section in both those writings, the next section at the conclusion of the Sermon on the Mount, and the next event that Luke records in Acts. So the warning that not everybody who says the right words is doing the right things, and the story of care and healing given when something quite other is being asked for. As we are surrounded by all the rhetoric of electioneering, I wonder how you hear these passages. I can't help but be struck by Jesus' comments, Jesus' warnings about the difference between speech and action, and about the way in which action is rooted in character. And then that story in Acts about the man who thinks he wants one thing, money, and is actually given something else. He's given the possibility to live well and creatively. And it has me wondering about the relationship between what we think we need and want and what is best for the common good. I mean, if you think about it, the man who is begging at the door to the temple should actually be quite easy to deal with. He's in want. Give him the resources he needs. Give him what he wants so he can have something to eat and somewhere to sleep tonight. Whereas what actually happens is he's given a chance to live well, to flourish by having his health and his strength returned. It's that kind of model, for example, that informs the much aid and development work, not just meeting the immediate need, but bringing about the change that lets people live a full and a fully human life. Give a man a fish and he eats, give a man a fish, or teach him how to fish, and he can feed himself and others and live well. Church Action on Poverty, that group that we're involved with, puts it like this. We're committed to tackling poverty in the UK. We work in partnership with churches and people in poverty themselves to tackle the roots of the causes of poverty. We put gospel values of justice and compassion into practice. We know that the real expert on poverty are the people who live with it. And our work is driven by their insights and experiences. We help them make their voices heard. That is, don't just give them money. Find out what's going on and get in there and sort it. Work out how to do it and listen to the people who really know about it. And as I'm reading what the candidates are offering, as I'm listening to the election promises, I'm asking all the time, how is this enabling people to live their fullest lives, to function most humanly, to make our society a place where people flourish? And as I listen to people asking questions and indicating how they'll vote, I'm wondering, how does this enable us all to live together well? What happens outside the temple, whatever it is about deeds rather than words. And it emerges from the lives of people who are living what they say, not saying all the right things to sound good while choosing actions that show something else. Whatever else is going on in that moment, it is the living out of Jesus' words. By their fruits, you know who they are. By what they do, you can see what they truly believe, rather than by the simple words they say. And Peter and John clearly believe that the presence of God, the activity of God that they have experienced in Jesus, that they know themselves drawn into through the events of Pentecost, that is all about bringing, indeed being, a change in the world that has a real impact on how people live, on what opportunities they have, on life in its fullness, as our banner says. And those words of Jesus that Lillian read for us, they come immediately after that invitation to choose the narrow way, to live loving others. The reminder that life is not just about saying something that sounds right, nor is it about listening to people who sound convincing. It's about paying attention to what is actually going on and who is being served by the oratory and the high-profile events and the claims. What is the fruit of what is being said? And as Jesus illustrates, it's not always easy to discern. There is a thorn. It's the black buckthorn, which has little berries that look like small grapes. There is a thistle with a flower that looks like a fig. The choices that he's making, do you pluck grapes from a thorn bush? Well, you might if you're not paying attention. There may be a superficial resemblance between the one speaking the truth and the one who is deceiving or self-serving. But life is not nourished with the berries of a buckthorn or the flowers of a thistle, but with grapes and with figs. What is the fruit? What is happening as a result of what is being said? As we take seriously questions relating to our climate and our care of creation, what is being said by those with or seeking power, and what is being done and how are they living? As we pay attention to listening to the stories of those struggling here and in other countries with issues of poverty, what is being said by those with and those seeking power, and how does their way of responding to those stories indicate they're paying attention to the reality that people live with? And as we reflect on our own practices of inclusion on all sorts of issues, what is being said by those with and seeking power, and what rhetoric is being used to bring people together or drive them apart? The story in Acts gives us a glimpse not just of a miracle to make us gasp in wonder, but rather of what it is to live with the kind of integrity, the kind of attention that Jesus is talking about here as being trustworthy. Peter and John meet the man in need. They could have said, here's a coin, and gone on into the temple, or more likely, since they seem to have been short on resources, sorry mate, we've got nothing either, and gone on into the temple to pray, accepting the fact they weren't able to change this man's life, trusting somebody else would get round to it. Rather, they stop and talk to him. They attend to him. They look straight at him. They ask for his attention on them. They initiate a real meaning with a real person. And in that moment, God is acting. And there is renewal, and there is healing, and there is change that isn't just for a moment and doesn't just smooth over the immediate need. Gives them enough money to have supper tonight. It offers a whole new possibility of living. This is a story about people living what they say, and it's a story about being given what is needed rather than what might be wanted. And isn't that what we should be looking for those who are seeking power in our community? Those who will be real and meet the realness of people who make up our society, not just the neat, easily categorized ones, but the ones on the edge, the ones who need and cannot give, the ones who are excluded from what is taken as normal life for whatever reason. We don't know why this man can't walk. It may have been accident, it may have been birth, it may be his own stupid fault that he hadn't paid attention and had damaged himself. But we're seeking a community in which all have the possibility of living lives that matter and that are fulfilling. And we seek those who will work to make that happen. Those who will truly listen and understand. Those whose lives and words form a whole. Those whose owning of their power and using their power is shaped by the exploration of a common good, of widespread flourishing, not just the protection of a sectional interest or the gaining of easy popularity. So as we're listening to the promises and the attacks on the other side that make up our election rhetoric, these are the kind of questions we're invited to ask. Is there fruit that really gives life in what's being said? Is there integrity, or is it just show? Will this help to shape and support a society in which people who are currently excluded can find a place? A community which has the resources to meet real need and offer real change, and not one that's divided and set against itself. Party labels are less important than this kind of reflection. Is this person, is this policy one that bears grapes and figs, or is it thorns and thistles? Is this person who they say they are, or are they just guised in the clothing of somebody else? Is what is being promised a quick fix that gains popularity, or is it a chance to discover newness and possibility? And you know, there's only one way that we can ask these questions with integrity, and it's if we ask them first of ourselves as a community and ourselves as individuals. Is the fruit that we bear truly the fruit we are called to? Or is it thorns and thistles which will nourish nobody? And remember, the fruit of the Spirit is identifiable. It isn't just this, generally fruit that's nice. It's love, joy, peace, goodness, kindness, faithfulness, humility, self-control. Are these the marks of our community? Not have they been in the past, because yes, I know they have been, and I know there have been times when they haven't been. But more importantly, are they marking us now? Are we growing together in loving that is real and honest, that can bear and indeed celebrate difference, forgive injury? Are we joyful with that deep delight in being the people of God alive in the world where God is active? A joy that's unshakable, even in the midst of personal and community struggle. Are we at peace? At peace within our community and building peace, true peace, not sweeping things under the carpet quietness, but at peace in our neighbourhood and our world? Is goodness what people think of when they think of us? Does kindness mark our dealings with one another? The way we speak to each other, the way we speak of each other? Are we faithful to the duties that we've undertaken and the ideals that we name? And what about humility? Not the false, oh, I couldn't possibly, I'm not nearly good enough, but the real thing of serving and not demanding to be served, but also of accepting care and service because we know that we're not omnipotent and self-sustaining. Are we marked by that kind of self-acceptance that lets us let go of defensiveness and trust in the loving action of God? Is that humility growing amongst us? And is the control of who we are, how we think, what we choose, is that rooted in our faith and the calling that we acknowledge, rather than being handed over to the propaganda of the powers of advertising or politics or economics or prejudice of some sort or other? Is this fruit of the Spirit growing among us, within us, so that the thorns and thistles simply don't have room to flourish? I'm struggling with to manage the man's garden, but I am gradually learning that the more of the plants that I want that I can get into the ground, the less room there is for the ones I don't want. Not always, but it's worth trying. The more of the fruit that is growing within us, the less room there is for the other stuff. If we are going to challenge, and I believe we should, if we are going to challenge those who are seeking power within our society, and if we are going to use this model of fruit and integrity as the basis of how we make choices, then we can only do it with integrity as we examine ourselves in the light of Jesus' words and in dependence on the life of the Spirit in and through us. Now, I don't imagine that Peter and John went out that afternoon expecting to change somebody's life or to be written about and read about 2,000 years later. What they did was go out expecting to encounter God's promise and call. They were on the way to the temple. They were going to worship and to pray and to talk together about the things of the faith, because that's what you do at the temple. They hadn't got there yet. They were still on the way. That is, they weren't yet doing the faith or the religious stuff formally when the possibility arose. But because they were exploring and committed to discovering the Spirit's activity in the world they were living in, they find that right there in their path is the opportunity to live the life they're exploring, with love to invite somebody to flourish, with joy to celebrate a new beginning, peacefully to overturn assumptions and expectations, to do good kindly, to be faithful to the call that they have heard to be witnesses of what God is doing and to join in, to be humble in offering what they have and not making false claims, and to be controlled in their actions by the Spirit's action in them and not the assumption that God wasn't outside the temple or that the man's desire was to be ignored. In that moment, in that encounter, as they faithfully met a real person with their reality, the kingdom came and the Spirit was active and the world changed and the fruits were on show. Our politicians tell us that voting for them will change the world. And they're right. The votes that we cast, the choices we will make next month will have an effect on the lives of many people, including us, and will shape the institutions of our society for the next years. So this election, as every election, matters. And we come to it not just as those who are interested citizens, though never less than that. We come to it as those who listen to the words of the Sermon on the Mount. And like the disciples in Acts, are trying to live out the meaning of the fruits of Pentecost. And that will shape our questions and our choices. And it will do that most effectively, most deeply, if it also shapes our life together as a congregation and our lives as individuals. Paying attention to those who claim to speak to us of power and with truth, asking about fruit and integrity, and to those around with a claim on our care, listening carefully, meeting with fruit and with integrity. All of that is involved in living faithfully as those who seek to follow Jesus within the light of Pentecost.